whenever we listen about remote work, it was usually people from CS and IT background. I graduated as electronics and instrumentation engineer. It's a job that requires me doing a lot of hardware stuff, whether it's joining wires, doing some soldering, flashing the board with the latest firmware, speaking to different conferences around the world. As a young, broke, early stage employee, that was my passport to explore the world. So in 2019, I took my first international trip to give a talk at this conference, and I would say the traveler bug bitten me there, and I was like, okay, there's a huge world out there waiting to be explored, and I cannot just spend my life in a small office. That's where I decided, okay, I'm gonna figure a way out. I talked to my manager and I was like, you should allow me to work from home. The first reaction was a huge laughter. During my time at Siemens, COVID happened, and it was established that even in the hardware, remote work is possible. We build a drone, and I was like initial few guys in India who actually started FPV freestyling and FPV racing. Now I also run a small aerial production company. Whenever I'm in India, I want to explore a particular place. I just write them an email. Hey, remember me, that drone guy? I'm visiting. Give me a room for 2 days, and I'll shoot a video for you. And they're like, yeah, happily, because they have seen 1 million views on the latest reel.
You have to get me a free room.
I was attending a lot of different conferences. I had a lot of contacts. So I just wrote down an email to everyone, and I told that I am looking for a new gig. After a few months, I had 4 companies that I was working for. I was not the guy who ever thought of going into IITs or that sort of things. I made a hell lot of projects during my entire 4 years. And between all this process, I was constantly documenting whatever I'm learning. That's like expanding the surface area of people finding you. When you're going for an interview, out of that 10 people who have nothing, if you have a blog, you definitely stands out of the crowd. I always have been a very lazy kid, and I automated my home so I could just, make an application and turn lights on and off from my phone. And now my entire home is automated. I think it all boils down to the attitude of solving problem.
Welcome to Beyond the Brackets. I am Nitesh.
And I am Paridhi, and today we're thrilled to have Ayan with us. Ayan is an electronics and hardware engineer who works with clients from all over the world remotely. Welcome to the show, Ayan.
Thank you very much, Nitesh. Paridhi, I have been catching up with your show lately. It's pretty excited. And I'm very happy to be part of whatever you are guys doing, and happy to contribute in whatever way possible. So thanks for having me.
We're very excited to have you here as well. So let's start with talking about your personal journey. Can you share a little bit about how you first learned that you can work remotely in a remote setting?
Right. So I'll set the stage by giving a brief background in terms of my education and qualification. So as you mentioned, I graduated as an electronics engineer, specifically applied electronics and instrumentation. That is a field that people choose to go if they don't make it to computer science or electronics and communication. But for me, it was rather different. I actually wanted to do that since the very beginning. So I graduated in 2016, and I actually started my first job 1 year earlier of graduation in 2015. So I joined this company called Mentor Graphics. It's an electronic design automation company. That means it helps a lot of electronic designers, circuit designer, PCB manufacturers all over the world. They design software for it. And I was hired as embedded software engineer. So this is like the mix of skills from hardware and software that you combine. Your code runs on small microcontrollers and microprocessors. That's what embedded software engineers do. And back then I used to work on automotive applications, and the code I run used to work on all sort of cars, in-vehicle infotainment, ADAS, and all sort of things. So as you already could figure out that this was the job that requires me doing a lot of hardware stuff, whether it's joining wires, doing some soldering, flashing the board with the latest firmware, even updating the bootloader, all sort of thing that requires me to be physically present at an office, sometimes inside a server room, which is like freezing cold, and I never really appreciated that. But yeah, that was the part of the job, because there were a lot of things that involved being around hardware. So things that goes inside cars, these were the small boards, and I used to tinker with these boards. Also, back then I had a small startup in Internet of Things space. It's called SDIoT. It's no longer in operation. But that was a small thing that we were doing on side in home automation space. So to answer your question, how did I first learn about remote work? I was very actively participating in different communities, and I have some idea that there are some people who are from computer science background who can just take their laptop, sits on the beach, and program. I had this some sort of idea because of words floating around in the communities, but I never really thought that they had a real job. I used to think that they are like either freelancers or they are just designers or they are just applying for jobs sitting on the beach and nothing more than that. Why I mentioned startup, I'll come to that. So the very first encounter for me where I learned what a remote job is, we took a small trip with everyone in the team from my startup, and we went to Goa. And this one trip almost took like 6 to 7 months to plan, because you can just imagine. I had a full-time job, I had a startup, and it was very initial days, and everyone was like totally burned off, working weekends and doing all sort of things. So we decided, okay, let's take a trip to Goa, and it took us 6 months, 7 months to plan that trip. We met a few people in Goa. It was like in 2017, so before lockdown, and I happened to meet this fascinating lady from Sweden, still a very good friend, and she was staying at the same hotel, and she was working by the pool side, and we used to see her every day. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna break the ice. I just went to her, say hello, and gave my introduction, and then I got to know that she is a remote worker working in a company in Sweden, which is into storage. And that was the first real encounter of actual remote worker sitting on a beach with a laptop, and had a real story for me to learn. And then I asked all the questions that I have been keeping up in my mind, that how could your company trust you that you're working and not taking a dip in the waters? And yeah, so long story short, I got all the answers, and from that was a real encounter for me, that okay, this is possible. But I still had this in the back of my mind that perhaps I have chosen a wrong career in electronics, because whenever we listen about remote work, it was usually people from CS and IT background who were doing something of that sort. So I had this idea, I had my first encounter, I know this is possible, but I still never really realized it as a potential that I could one day do. So yeah, to answer your question, that was the first time I learned about remote work. It's a bit long story, but yeah.
Right. No, that's amazing.
How
So
did you go from there to tell us a story about how you discovered that you can work remotely, like during COVID, and what was that like?
So fortunately, I started some sort of remote slash hybrid work before COVID. So as I mentioned, I was very actively contributing to different communities. And one part of that was me speaking to different conferences around the world. As a young, broke, early stage employee, that was my passport to explore the world. So I used to put talks at different international conferences, and I just crossed my fingers that I will get accepted, I will get a grant, and I will get to travel there. So in 2019, I took my first international trip to give a talk at this conference called FOSS Asia Summit, happened in Singapore. And this is again happening at this present moment as we talk in Vietnam. So this was a good summit. And my talk was about hardware. And the only good thing about my career back then is whenever I put a talk, I got selected, because not many people were talking about hardware. So yeah, that was a positive thing out of that. So that was my first trip to Singapore, and I met a lot of amazing people in that conference. And I would say the traveler bug bitten me there, and I was like, okay, there's a huge world out there waiting to be explored, and I cannot just spend my life in a small office, so soldering wires and writing device drivers. So that's where I decided, okay, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna figure a way out. By that time, our startup was doing fairly decent, and I offloaded most of the work to my co-founder. So I decided, okay, I'm just gonna take care of my job. I'll have a talk with a manager, and so I went back working for the same company called Mentor Graphics. And I talked to my manager, and I was like, okay, we should figure out something, and you should allow me to work from home. The first reaction was like, I would say, a huge laughter from his side, because he was like, it's not possible. You are a hardware engineer, you need boards. And then I mentioned, okay, I can take the board home. And then he told me the real price of that board, which was like somewhat around 17 to 18 lakhs, which was more than my annual salary. So I figured out, okay, it's not gonna work. But he actually gave me a small challenge, which was I was very fortunate for that. So he mentioned that whatever you are doing at the office, I don't know, like if he was being witty or he was actually challenging me. He just mentioned that whatever things, your jobs, your responsibilities that you are doing at office, if you manage to do it remotely from your home, we can figure out some work model for you, like 2 days a week at home. So back to my jobs and responsibilities. As I mentioned, I have to do a lot of work with hardware. That means attaching wires, putting up SD card with new firmware, removing SD cards, turning the board on and off, checking the display if the board is having HDMI out, and all those things. So from there, I took that challenge. Okay, whatever things that I'm doing manually, moving to the server room, taking out the SD card, flashing the new image, putting the board with the new image, putting some jumpers. I'm gonna figure out a way to do all that remotely sitting at my home. And it took me a lot of time, I would say more than 1 year. But to cut the story short, I was actually able to achieve almost 85 to 90% of the tasks that we used to do from there. And this gave birth to a project called a USB connection exerciser, USB Connex, where there was a small device that I created out of some boards that were available, Arduino, basically. That was a prototype. And using that device, I can remotely turn on and turn off the board. I could capture the HDMI signals. I could put on the jumper. And there were some ways, hacky ways that I found to remove SD card without actually removing it physically, basically putting some switches between the lines, data and the power lines. And so, yeah, I showed that to the team and later showed that to our business unit director. And they actually got pretty excited. And long story short, they actually end up making a product out of that thing that I did. And a lot of companies that I know of today still using it in one form or the other because we open source some of it, we sold some of it. I think some of the components we applied patent for back then. But that's where my manager actually agreed for some sort of remote work, hybrid work. And it was not basically truly remote work. It was like, okay, you can take extended holiday. And if you feel like working and if we need you, we'll ping you. And then in the same year, I took a trip to New Zealand. It was a full backpacking trip. I spent almost 1.5, 2 months there. And I supported my team whenever I could. Nothing major happened, no accidents. And whenever I need an help, I could just call my coworker and I was like, okay, my USB connect is not working. Just give it a reboot. So that was the worst that I had to do in 1.5, 2 months. And from there, I would say I started my remote work journey before actually COVID happened.
That's
This
so
is incredible.
incredible. You mentioned speaking at conferences, right? Like, I have a question about that. How does one get to know about such conferences happening, and what's the process around like getting selected? Yeah. Like,
Right.
as for me in college, like, I didn't even know that college students could get accepted at conferences, for example.
They definitely could. I've also seen a lot of students from school, like mid school, high school, in the conferences coming at a full grant. And the good thing is, I'm not sure if you are aware of this. Even if you're not a speaker, there are ways to get into the conference and it's fully sponsored. I'm not promoting that you should use that if you are not in a need. But to answer your question, like every other industry, in tech industry, a lot of geeks and nerds, they come together and they decide, okay, let's do a conference where we will give talks, we will do workshops, we will do hackathons. So fortunately, in software industry and nowadays even in hardware industry, a lot of conferences are happening around the world. To know about these conferences, first of all, you could never know about every conferences. Like I sometimes see people attending some conference and I'm like, how did I not get to know about this? This like totally aligns with what I do. But you should attend different meetups, join meetup groups in your local community, join meetup group online. Like I remember back in the university days, there was this meetup group in Israel that have meetup every month, and I used to join online. And like I learned a lot of great deal of things from that. So be very active in the communities. That first thing. Number two, have an online presence. So especially if you follow right people on Twitter, on LinkedIn, they usually talk about it. Uh, Check who are the regular speakers at different conferences. They usually put a post out if they are doing any speaking thing in a conference, and from there you could get to know about it. My first advice would be to attend a couple of conferences, couple of meetups, get the hang of the idea how community function, how do you actually behave in a community, what things are happening, uh, what things you should learn about in terms of when you meet with people, diverse group of people from all over the place, and then give a first talk in a local meetup group because you have a smaller audience there. Then you will get a hang of it, and when you have some sort of public speaking experience, so when you could explain the thing that you are doing to a local audience, then you can apply for the bigger conferences. There are some conferences that are supported by companies like Red Hat, IBM, Microsoft. There are some conferences that are supported by communities, bigger communities like I mentioned, FOSS Asia, and Ruby on Rails, all sort of things, Surikit IDS. And there are some conferences that are totally community driven. I think PyCon India is one of that. It's totally organized by the community. So most of these conferences have something called CFP, or call for proposals, and they generally open depending on how big the conference. If it's a really big conference, they open CFPs around 4 or 6 months before. Then you can propose a topic, and you should attach your bio, what you do, how qualified are you to talk about that topic. And if your proposal gets through, you will be called to give the talk during the conference. It is worth mentioning that not all conferences sponsors your travel and stay, but even if they don't, and you get this opportunity, you should try to attend it because it's a really great exposure. And once you build that trust that you're a good speaker, then eventually you might also get opportunity to be a keynote speaker in some conferences. You never know. So that is like the bare minimum roadmap one could follow to be a speaker at any given conference.
Got it. Cool. So next, let's talk about your journey from Siemens to independent consulting. So Siemens was your second job, right? Yeah. How did that journey look like?
So I was talking about Mentor Graphics. That was the first company I joined. Later, that same company was acquired by Siemens. So Siemens CDA, and it became Siemens PLM. So we kept transitioning. At one point of time, I was working for Mercedes because there was this car that Siemens and Mercedes were combinedly designing. So after working on all these different projects, all these different companies, and I was doing some sort of remote work, as I mentioned, which was not truly remote work, but some sort of a hybrid model that my manager and I have negotiated. And I have to renegotiate whenever I have a change of manager. So that was a pain in the ass, to be honest. But long story short, during my time at Siemens, COVID happened and everyone had to work from home. Even the people who were very adamant that work from home is not possible. I won't lie, there were some people who have to come to the office because to support the entire team. Usually, these are the people who were managing the boards in the lab. So that was there. But with a very minimal support, I would say, like even 1 or 2% of people attending the office, rest of the team did pretty good. There was no impact on the business. In fact, if I remember correctly, we made more money. Everyone got more variable incentive pay. So it was established that even in the hardware, remote work is possible. And all those notions that we had prior, all those biases, they were very greatly challenged during the COVID. And it was established, okay, that remote work is possible. So after the first lockdown, there was the small window when everyone was calling their employees back to the office. And that's when I decided, okay, with the job that I'm currently having, and because of the product that I have developed, I have to hop a lot of different teams within the same organization. And that comes with a change of manager. And that comes with a lot of renegotiating my work model and trying to explain why I have to work remotely. So I decided, why not join a company that's fully remote? And I came across this company called Balena. This is another full Internet of Things company, basically a SaaS-based company, but for IoT devices. And I know a few people who already were working in this company, and I joined Balena. It didn't go very well, I would say, because there was a time when chip shortening was happening. I'm sure you might be aware of it. Because of COVID, a lot of chip shortening happened, and the company was not doing great. There was a lot of layoffs, a lot of rearrangements, and after I said my goodbye to the company, I was like, okay, I need to figure out a way to make it sustainable and not just to, hop jobs. Because by that time, I also got a taste of saving a lot of taxes apart from just the travel part of thing. As being an independent remote contractor, it has its own perk and you get to save a lot of taxes. And that was a thing that was not possible in a job, in a full-time job, even if it's remote. So I decided, okay, I need to figure something out of my own. And because everything connects and I was attending a lot of different conferences, I had a lot of contacts. I know a lot of pain points of different organizations. So I just wrote down an email to everyone and I told that I am looking for a new gig. If there is any opportunity that you might have for me. And mind you, this was not about they giving me consulting work. This was totally about they giving me a remote job. So I totally formulated that email in that way that I am looking for a new job. You know me, I'm a journalist. I can speak about your product in different organizations. I can write a decent code. I can work with hardware. So if there's any opportunity, just let me know. the patterns that emerged out from that email is I got few replies, and in that few replies, everyone, because of the chip shortage, they were tight on budget. They wanted the work done they wanted the work done quickly, but they don't want it to go to the hassle of hiring a full-time employee because the times were really scary. And this I'm talking about second wave of COVID. And in that patterns that emerged, it was very clear that they really want good people to work on the project to solve the problem. But number one, they don't want a full interview cycle where they identify people, ask for resume, and then take 3 months to hire. And number two, they don't want liability that if the product that they're working on doesn't work because there were not many buyers in COVID, then they don't have to give severance package, all sort of things that comes with a full-time employee. So working on that pattern, I actually realized there is this opportunity to consult this company as a freelancer, as a independent contractor. So I negotiated these sort of terms with a few companies, and it became very clear that this is something that really has demand out there. People don't want the liability of a full-time employee, but they definitely want people with good experience and good hands-on knowledge. So I signed contract with one company, and after a few months, I signed contract with another company, and then with another company, and then with one more company. So I had four companies that I was working for. It was pretty tiring, and it didn't align with my philosophy that I want to sit on a beach and code. It was not aligning with that. So I actually hired my first employee, and I put him into one of the account for that company. And slowly, I built a team of three people, including me. And it was going pretty well. I was traveling as I wanted. I was saving taxes as I wanted. I had a team of people who were taking care of the things that I am not good at, and I slowly expanded and I started to do things that I really love instead of just doing the things that I wanted to do because of bread and butter. So I expanded a lot. I moved to different things. I was doing drones for a lot many years, but as a hobby. But now I'm also doing drone consulting and drone production work. Yeah, so I know my answers are getting pretty long, but this is the baseline of how it all started, and I hope it makes sense to you.
No, yeah, this is great. Yeah, this section particularly because I think it like teaches like two things that you don't necessarily need to be like a full-time employee to make money properly. You can go into the consulting route, and that is a possibility. In fact, more so like in 2024 with the job market and everything that's going on,
Definitely.
the layoffs and everything. And also like I think the importance of wearing multiple hats in 2024, like you it's always beneficial if you know how to code and write and then speak as well. So even that adds a lot of value today.
Definitely. I'll just mention that it took almost 1 year to actually adjust to it because before that, my health insurance, my taxes, everything was very much easily handled by my company. And it took me almost 1 year and a lot of bad mistakes to get into the picture that they're gonna give me a fixed amount and I'm responsible for my own taxes. I'm responsible for buying the health insurance. So everything has pros and cons, but I can definitely say that this is like 1,000 times better than a full-time job, and I would any day choose it over a full-time job. I hope I never have to go back to the full-time job. That's like my biggest nightmare as of now, but so far it's quite fulfilling.
Right. So speaking of taxes, can you also share how your compensation journey has changed over the years?
It changed a lot. So actually, I was not from a very, great college back then. I was not the guy who, ever thought of going into IITs or that sort of thing. So I was pretty satisfied in the fact in second year that I'm gonna get a compensation of, a medium range 4 or 5 lakhs that max. And I was more focusing on getting the right job because I could see a lot of people from electrical and electronics background segueing into IT, computer science, and customer service. And I was very adamant that I'll work for free, but I have to work in a company that is into embedded systems and IoT. Fortunately, because the 4 years of engineering, I made like a hell lot of projects. I documented everything that I was doing. I attended almost every tech fest you could think of in India. So I think that paid off, and I actually managed to get the highest package in the college back then. I'm not the guy that shy away from it. I think it was my first package was first package was 15, second was 17, and that was a full-time job. Uh, but talking about the remote opportunities that I established for myself, and especially consulting, it varies a lot depending on the company that you're working for. Some people like to pay hourly fees, and then you have to do billable. Some people like to sign SOW, statement of work, and depending on your deliverables, what you are doing, your time frame you are doing, it changes a lot. So I cannot, comment a fixed number that I am earning as of now, or was I earning when I had 4 clients. But one thing is for sure that it was like a great difference, more so because you save a lot of tax. So effectively talking about India, if you are doing a full-time job and if you are above 15 17 lakhs annual package, then you are in a 30% tax bracket, and there are not many ways to save taxes. There are just you do TDS, right? The government will deduct tax and then you will get the salary. But here it's like a business. You will get the first money, then you can do your expenses, and then you will do your taxes. So effectively, if you are under 50 lakhs, you are effectively paying 10% of tax, which is like amazing. My goal is to go to 0% tax bracket. And I don't see any shame in it. I don't see any shame talking about it, because that's the provision that tax department has provided, and everyone who can should benefit from it. But instead of talking about numbers of earning, it's really important for me to talk about the numbers that you can say, because not many people talk about it, and it is really huge per se. If you are into remote consulting or even a remote contractor in a company that's outside India, and you are shipping your services to them, it is really a big difference.
Right. Amazing.
This is amazing. Oh my God, dude. I have like a couple of follow-up questions. I'm gonna interrupt here. So you skipped over some really amazing parts of your journey here that I want to focus on and double click on. So you mentioned that you went from 1 client to 4 clients, and like that is not an easy thing. That is something that a lot of people just struggle to get to. So can you tell us how did that happen from 1 to 4 clients?
Sure, right. So as I mentioned, that everything connects eventually, and everything start making sense. So the projects that I was documenting in university, or even when I was in job, the conferences that I was attending as a full-time employee, that actually builds up a lot of trust in the community and a lot of contacts. So when I mentioned that, I emailed all my contacts that I'm looking for an opportunity. If you have anything, then just let me know. There were a lot of replies that I got, and the 4 clients that I actually were able to sign it, that was a very small number, depending on respective of how much replies that I got from that one email. And there was the few clients that works on SOW. For example, I was working for this Nigerian blockchain company. The product was really solid. The team was really great. I was the only Indian working with them, and they were like so much fun. Bless you all, guys, if you are listening. But the product couldn't work, and they didn't. They were not able to raise funds. But good thing happened is you make more contacts, and once they ramped on the business, they actually referred me to a competitor, which was like surprising for me. But this things happens in tech. If you have a trust, if you have that value, then people gives a lot of referrals, whether it's speaking opportunity, whether it's work opportunity. So referrals is the only way. I never went to anyone and I was like, hey, are you looking for a developer advocate, or hey, are you looking for a hardware engineer, are you looking for someone who can make videos about your product? I never really did that until now. But I would say there were a lot of referrals, there was a lot of trust building, there was a lot of meeting new people, and everything eventually paid off. It was really hard to do multiple jobs, especially given the time when everyone wants availability. In COVID, everyone wants to milk the very last dollar value that they were spending on any given employee. And that's where hiring come into this picture. And that process taught me a lot about hiring. Made some mistake, but eventually learned from it. You are right. It's really hard, but at the same time, it's also rewarding and resourceful.
So basically, your entire life, like all the good deeds that you had been doing ever since the first year of college, you were able to collect the reward for that. Like it's
Oh,
a long term
100%.
play.
100%, 100%, 100%. Like, you never know when something picks up, and I'm sure that some things will come into this conversation later on. But just to give you an idea, that there was this one video that I made in 2012, 2013, and that is at this very moment. Even today, I had a call with someone who have seen this video and want to work with me because of that one crappy video that I posted somewhere on Vimeo. So you never really know what will come around and give you an opportunity. So yeah, keep documenting.
Amazing.
Okay, so let's talk about your drone business now. I remember you showed us your board of drones on the last call. I'm not sure if you have that right now where you are, but yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm traveling and I am not carrying the drones this time because this was a very run and gun trip, just one backpack and my laptop and that's it. So cannot really show you, but I'll send you some picture if you want to put it in the video, then you can. Talking
Yes,
about
please.
100%, talking about drone business. So drones were really something that I got into initially in the university days, and I attended a technical fest at BITS Pilani. It's called Apogee. Everyone must attend it if they are in university. Just attend BITS Pilani or BITS Goa Fest. So that is like the real sort of a game changer thing for university students. And there was this competition happening called hovercraft racing. So hovercraft is basically a small vehicle that can run on the land as well as on the sea. And it requires actually two motors, brushless DC motors. I'm going a little bit technical, but it's important to set the base for it. So it requires two motors, one to actually put air into the lower part of the hovercraft, which is called skirt, which will actually hover it, and one motor to push it forward. And I remember I had one of my best friend as my teammate, and we were like really broke college kids. We had no money, and this one motor used to cost like 1,200 rupees back then, and you had no choice. Like that's the only motor we have. Take it or leave it. Yeah, really broke kids wanted to really participate in that competition, not because we wanted to win, just because we wanted to see the world. Like traveling was really, even back then, it was really important, and college was liberating. We were able to travel. So we used to sign up on all the tech fests so we could get to travel. So we sign up for that hovercraft competition and we send them a very vague random design that we will make hovercraft with just one motor. And they accepted us, okay, come show us. And we were like, okay, fuck, how would we gonna do that? But we somehow, do that jugaad thing, the hack thing, tinkering thing, whatever you like to call it. But we managed to make a hovercraft with just one motor. And to everyone's surprise, like there were people who were like having three motors, four motors on the hovercraft, and we won that competition. I still remember the prize money was like 15,000, and that was like a crazy prize money. And me and my buddy, we were deciding, okay, we're gonna invest that, we're gonna make more hovercraft. Uh, we were carrying that check back to Delhi, and then there was a first encounter with the drones. People in the BITS Plani, they were flying drones, and we were like, okay, that is crazy. And now we have the money. This drone, this seems like they have four motors. 15,000, we could get four motors. Okay, let's build a drone. And the long story short, it was not 15K that we end up burning, but a lot more than that. But yeah, that was the first project, robotics project that we did. We built a drone and we kept building on it. We kept making it smaller and smaller, and that was the time when FPV became very famous. FPV is first person view, so you put a goggles and you fly a drone using the camera fit that's coming. And I was like initial few guys in India who actually started FPV freestyling and FPV racing. And then these few people come together and we organized first FPV race in India in IIT Gandhinagar. And from there was no turning back. It was like importing the best motors from outside, making the best design, making a new frame, making the drone faster. And between all this process, I was constantly documenting whatever I'm learning. That this design thing will make a drone go faster. This is a good motor. This is a good ESC. This will give you more range. And all those things I was documenting. And as I mentioned, that video somehow got interest of this company called Hackaday. It's like an online portal where a lot of hardware engineers and tinkerers they talk about these things in general. And I got connected with someone on Hackaday, and they were like, there were many queries that we were getting about FPV drones, but we had no idea how to address it. Do you think you can make a course on FPV drones since you are already making videos about it and blogs about it? And I was like, okay, what do we have to do? And they were like, you just have to give us four videos. We will edit it, we will make thumbnails, we will promote it. You just have to give us four videos, and we'll pay you like some 1,20,000 rupees for that. And I was like a college kid, I was like, I'm all in. Okay, let's do it. And from there it started, and then that course reached to many people. Many people made drones with it, and those many people comes with query, okay, my drone is not flying, but propellers I buy. And then it kept on compounding to a level. Then a lot of even startups comes to me and they were like, okay, we are building a drone, do you think we can onboard you? And you're like, no, I don't work for I don't work full time on drones or any other thing, and remotely it's not possible with startups. So I started consulting with them, and then I kept building my own drones. I kept taking my drones to on my trips and making videos. So there was this lot of community building that was intuitively happening without me knowing, and a lot of people joined the journey. Then one fine day, this author reached out to me. He was an ex-engineer at Boeing, and he was like, "I'm writing a book on drone. Would you become my reviewer of the book?" And the book is called "Designing Purpose-Built Drones by Ardu Pilot 2.1," and I am the reviewer of this book. It's by Pact Publication, and that book, went to different hands. So yeah, a lot of people come to me, they email me, and I pick the clients that I think I would like to work on. I'm still working on few clients on drone technology consulting, but at the same time, because I was carrying my drone and I was shooting aerial videos of different beautiful places, I got a lot of interest in videography and photography. And this is like my current favorite interest, filmmaking and photography. So I segued into it. I got good cameras, GoPros, DSLRs, whatnot. And now I also run a small aerial production company. So recently, I worked with Zostel to give them a small FPV drone video, outdoor and indoor, because these are the only drones that could do both. And this is like another side kick that I'm doing with drone production. It's still going strong, and this is the only thing that I see that will go with me to very far. I don't remember how I cannot say how long, but this is definitely gonna stay for a very, very long time because that is something that has given me enormous contacts to people and a lot of love from the community.
Oh my God, your journey has been so epic. Yeah, and I just love like Dosters and the whole experience and vibe that they've created, and it's so
Yeah,
cool that you're
100%.
associated with it
Yeah.
somehow. Yeah.
100%. Whenever I'm in India, I just for example, I want to explore a particular place. I just write them an email. Hey, remember me, that drone guy? I'm visiting. Give me a room for 2 days, and I'll shoot a video for you. And they're like, yeah, happily, because they have seen a million views on the latest reel.
You have to get me a free room in the hostel.
Yeah, but you have to fly a drone and make a video for them in return.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, learn to build drones, and you could definitely get free rooms at this hostel or some other hostels.
That's so cool.
That's like, dude, this is so inspiring.
Yeah. So I have one last question for you. What's an important thing that remote work has enabled for you in your personal life? So I know you mentioned traveling and the taxes, yeah, the deduction on taxes and everything. But other than that, like some non-obvious things, important things that have happened in your life because of remote work.
Location independence is gonna be the very top, and I have been to a lot of different countries, a lot of different places, a lot of different cities. And initially, when I was working full time, I still remember the process. It was very tedious. So you have to log into a very crappy SAP portal, which only opens in Internet Explorer. You have to apply for the leaves. Your manager approves the leaves. You have to send that email to HR. HR will send you a written consent that you can show to get the visa. And now with the remote work, I don't really have to do any of that, which is like the big relief. So location independence is very, very real. I always had a return ticket. I still do for countries that don't allow, without traveling with a return ticket, unfortunately, on Indian passport. But now I can travel as long as I want. And I can, like today, I'm in Singapore. Tomorrow, I can be in Thailand. I can be in Vietnam. And we have done that. This is like the biggest pro, in my opinion, for remote working. Tax benefit, as I already mentioned, that is there. You save a lot of money. Up until now, I'm not sure how long it's gonna stay. I wish it will stay forever, but you save a lot of taxes. The diversity of work that you get and the diversity of people that you get to meet because of remote work, that is also phenomenal. There's this a big remote workers community in Vietnam. I was talking to the other day, and most of them are digital nomads. Most of them were remote workers. Some are working on their own businesses. Some are working on different companies. And it's so fascinating to see that we were all sitting in the WeWork. We were just shaking hands, and the next moment you see two people are collaborating. They were making some videos, or they were like, "Okay, you are a web designer. I'm a marketer. I'm a salesperson. I have this business idea. Let's join hands," and they become co-founders. So the diversity of work that you get and the diversity of people that you get to meet, that can only happen when you travel and you travel freely. And yeah, once you're in the ecosystem, you're definitely gonna meet a lot of other remote workers like we met, we all three. So yeah, that is like one of the biggest thing that remote work gives you.
Got it. Over to you, Nitesh.
Yeah, thank you. And this has been amazing, as I've already told a lot of times. Your whole journey has been so inspiring. The first thing that I want to start with is, can you talk about the time you went backpacking in New Zealand for 1.5 months? How did that, like, what are the logistics for that, and what do you need?
Sure. So this was still back then when I was a full-time employee, but I had negotiated a sort of extended holiday slash hybrid work model support whenever on-demand support with the company in 2019 September, and that is like the equivalent to March April in New Zealand, like in India. So I don't know. I remember that one of my good friend from school, she was in New Zealand for 2 years. She was graduating, and unfortunately, the country rejected her parents' visa to visit her during the graduation. And we were just chatting the other day, and I told her that I'm planning a trip to Iceland because digital nomads and Iceland, that is like the favorite combination. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to Iceland. I have seen Singapore and I've seen the world. Just one country, and I was wanted to planning the Iceland. Nothing wrong with that, but it was too ambitious at that time. So we were just talking on the call, and she mentioned that hey, I'm gonna be graduating without anyone. So why don't you come to New Zealand? It's like it's not Iceland, but it's not bad. It has a lot of things, and you can still ski here if you want. And I was like, okay, that's not a bad idea. So after the call, I checked for the visa requirements, and without thinking anything, I just applied for the visa then and there. I remember they were asking for ITRs. I always have that in my document folder on my NAS. So ITR, photo, all sort of things I just uploaded on the website. I remember after 7 days, I got a call. Why do you want to go to New Zealand? I just explained that it's my friend's graduation ceremony, and I will be traveling to a few places after that together with her. And then the very next day, I got a visa on my email, and I was still in the office. I was celebrating that I got the visa, and I just booked the tickets. And there was this layover in Malaysia, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to Malaysia as well. So I also took a visa for that for one day. And so yeah, as I mentioned, there was no return ticket even back then because I knew that I could do extended holidays, and we traveled from north to south. So I met her in Auckland, but for some reason she couldn't join me, so I just went solo. That was also no, that was not the first solo trip, but that was the solo trip where I'm not doing any sort of business. So Singapore was a solo trip, but it has a talk attached to it and a conference. But New Zealand was just purely first solo trip, just for the travel purposes. So I met her in Auckland, attended a graduation. Then I flew to the South Island, Queenstown, Dunedin, all sort of things. Kept meeting a lot of new people. Kept doing a lot of adventures, and in a blink, 2 months passed, and my folks back home, they never had seen anything like that of someone traveling in the family without a return ticket, and that too for 2 months. So they finally gave me a ultimatum that come home or we're gonna disown you. So that's when I booked a ticket back then. But yeah, after that there was no looking back. I could say like that was the one trip that was like changed everything.
And you make me want to do so many things. So you make me want to build drones. You make me want to have these trips like without return tickets, backpacking trips. Like your
It's
life is.
actually It's actually fascinating that you mentioned because recently I wrote on my Instagram bio that drones are my passport to the world. Because whenever I need to
Wow.
travel, I just tell my folks that I got this opportunity to shoot this place while I had no such opportunity. Like I tell, okay, I need to go to Almaty, Kazakhstan because the tourism board is asking me to come to shoot Big Almaty Lake Frozen. And they were like, okay, nice, go. And then I write to the tourism board, hey, I'm coming to Almaty. Do you think I could fly drone there? I'll give you free videos. Just give me a room for one night.
That is so cool. And when you say you were backpacking in New Zealand, so how did you figure out? I'm just trying to understand how it works for my future extended trip to New Zealand. Like where do you stay? Like do you stay in hotels every day or what do you do?
No, no, I was not earning that much to stay in hotels in New Zealand. So it was usually backpackers, and New Zealand has like the most expensive backpackers hostels. So I think in the world, I think London is very expensive and New Zealand is very expensive. So I used to get a bunker bed and it share with the 6, 7 different 8 people, all from different nationalities. Nobody know each other. But after the night is over, everyone is greeting each other, sharing breakfast and planning trip where to go. So that was another good thing for backpacking. I don't really stay in hostels now because now I'm married and I usually travel with my wife. So now we look for hotels or Airbnbs. But back then it was only hostels. Saves a lot of money. You get to meet a lot of people and you don't have to worry about planning your day. You just look for a group who already have a plan sorted. You just go there, say them hi, and tell them that you are tagging along. So yeah, that was the plan back then.
This is amazing. Okay. Now I think we have established like a vision in the listener's head. Like, this is something that everybody listening, if they're like me, they want in their lives. So let's have this segment where you give the advice for them. So first thing, what would you tell a kid from an EC branch about building a successful career as an electronics engineer? Because as you mentioned, almost every EC branch kid in India at least is already either working in the IT industry or planning to move to a software development career. So what would you tell them about being successful as an electronics engineer?
Uh, First of all, disclaimer: I am not sure if I'm successful electronics engineer or not because I do a lot of things, and electronics has now become a very very small part of it, which is mostly on the hobby side and a small consulting gigs here and there. So not definitely not an expert, and definitely not someone who started with a vision where to reach in electronics or silicon sort of domain. So not an expert. But to talk about things that I did and that actually compounded over time and gave me some benefits, it's fortunately things are changing in India, especially. People have realized that the bare minimum value, talking from the first principle, is something tangible in the hand. And manufacturing is now becoming hot again in India because for a very, very long time, we were an economy which were based on exporting services, but we were never really doing manufacturing. At one point of time, especially in East India time, India was a manufacturing hub, but it somehow lost in the history, and now it's coming back. It's becoming cool again to make tables and chairs, to make small leather wallets with your hands, and even to make bigger machineries that produces steel and all. And semiconductors are becoming hot again. There are a lot of policies from government which is pushing Make in India and doing manufacturing. So it's definitely, I am seeing a change that people are not quitting at the same rate they were quitting back in my days and moving to IT and software. Nowadays, people are more resilient. They are trusting the policies, they are trusting the ecosystem, and they are trying to stick around. So the first thing is, yeah, don't quit. If you really, really have a passion for it, you will eventually find a way to make money out of it in hardware, in electronics. It might not be as handsome amount as you could get in a software right away. It might not be as early as second year in engineering, but it will happen if you stick around. So first thing is don't quit. There are a lot of opportunities out there in hardware, in silicon, in electronic design automation. You just have to stick around and just wait for it to fall into your lap. But you would definitely need to increase your chances. You cannot just sit idle and wait for a company to hire you because in software, people can take chances. If you file a bug, if you make a wrong commit, it's easier to go back and fix it. But if you make a wrong PCB design and a company sent it to manufacturing, or if you made a small code error in the bootloader and it's going inside a car, then you're talking about people's lives on stake and a lot of money on stake in terms of PCBs. So you cannot make mistakes there. That is the only reason that these companies they hire very very carefully, and that's why they need people who have a proven track record. So number two, how do you get track record? How do you build trust with your name? So what I did, I made a lot and lot of projects, like hell lot of projects during my entire 4 years. And usually when I tell people that follow project-based learning, the first question that I get is how I don't know what to make. Like what project should I make? Suggest me what project should I make? So my advice to them is the same that I followed myself. Is number one, look for the problems in your home and then keep expanding your circle. So, for example, I always have been a very lazy kid, and I never really wanted to get out of my bed in a wintry night and turn off the lights. So that was the bare minimum problem statement for me. And I automated my home so I could just, make an application and turn lights on and off from my phone. And now my entire home is automated. Even though I'm sitting in Singapore, I can see my home in Australia or in India because of the cameras I made myself and installed. So find the problems around you and keep solving it. It starts with your home, starts with yourself, and then look around you, your vicinity, your society. I remember once where I was living, there was three homes adjacent to each other on the same floor, and there were these small kids that often comes, rings the bell, and just ran away. And we were like, okay, who did that? So I made this small camera with small AI detection, and next time they did, we actually got their faces, and we look at the all the photos that we have on the society floor, and that tell me, okay, that's Aditya from tower number 13, and we just called their mom and gave them the video. So just start solving problems around you, yourself, societies, your communities. If you're attending a meetup group and that meetup group don't have a website, make website for them. If that meetup group is not recording videos, then try to find a way to use phones and record videos and make them online. So in this entire process, when you are solving problem, you learn a hell lot of things and make a habit of documenting everything. So what problem that you identified, how you solved it, what things you require to solve them. So whenever someone have a same problem, they will Google it. Kids are ringing the bell and running away. What should I do? And your blog will come on the top. Okay, you can make a ML based video surveillance camera that will detect them. So that's like putting yourself out there and expanding the surface area of people finding you. And when these people find you, there would often be some people who will have some opportunities for you. And even if not, but when you're going for an interview, you can say that everything is all right, but here's also my blog that I think you should give a look. And out of that 10 people who have nothing, if you have a blog, you definitely stands out of the crowd, and that gives you an extra edge. So documenting, having a space carved for yourself online where you document your projects, where you put yourself out there is definitely that takes you a long, long way. And yeah, solve real world problems. Start from home and keep expanding the circle as you move forward in the society hierarchy.
I love this advice. This is like not just good advice for building your electronics career, but this is, I think, good advice in general. Like this is what I have followed, and I have advised people for building a career in software or any other. Like do projects that solve real problems, and then document them on a blog or somewhere online. And that's a great way
Definitely.
for just letting the world discover you.
Definitely. So I remember there was this great newsletter out that I used to subscribe, and I was subscribing them for almost 3 or 4 years. And then I was talking to someone, and I remember the context that we were talking to that was mentioned in one of the old newsletters that they had. I went on the internet and I tried finding that newsletter. I couldn't find it. So I write them an email that, hey, I remember reading that newsletter 4 or 5 months back where you mentioned about this thing. Can I get that archive copy of that newsletter? And then the founder replied me and they were like, we don't really have a place to store archives. We do have archives. You can send you a PDF, but there is no link. Are you okay with that? I was like, I'm okay with that. Then I saw this pattern in their archive URL, which is like site name / the number of newsletter, like 1, 2, 3. So what I did that one fine morning, I had nothing to do, and I just wrote a small Python script which actually fetches all the archive from their database and showed them in a small landing page. I am not a great front end programmer, so that is like the bare bones website I made, and I just emailed them that I created an archive page for them. This is how it looks, or screenshot. This is I hosted it on a Raspberry Pi. You can see, and this is the code on my GitHub. And the amount of work that I got to get from them after that, like we are so close, we are working on a lot of different things. But just by solving that one problem, which they didn't even know that exist, like no one really asked for an archive before me, but now they were like, okay, we are sending archives to sponsors that see this. These are our old newsletter if you want to see, and they're getting sponsors. And now we have a relationship. I can reach out to them anytime. They can reach out to me. But I'm mentioning this because solving problems, helping any community that you are part of, that really goes a long way, and you never know what opportunity comes your way when you do that.
Love this. Wow. You are just like a bundle of amazing stories, man. Okay, one more question about, one more advice question. So when your friends ask you how do I get a kick-ass remote job, what advice do you share with them? Like apart from, is there anything specific apart from just building good projects and documenting them? Anything else that you can do to get a great remote job?
So honestly, the first thing I say them that it's not easy, and it needs to be a journey to go from full time to fully remote. It cannot happen in a snap that okay, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow as a remote worker, saving a lot of taxes. So this really goes a long way, and it's not a one time thing. So there are some friends who have come to me asking for such thing, and I remember telling them that first of all, start by negotiating at your current role. Like just go to your manager or supervisor and ask them what are the 5 or 10 problem points that you are currently having, and just don't mention that you are looking for a remote opportunity because they will be very adamant about it, and then take ownership of these things and start solving these problems and make sure that they never happen, never come again. Second thing is identify what are the blockers because of which you cannot work remotely with your current job. Is it because your company doesn't have a VPN? Is it you want to access some resources in the company that you cannot access from home? Or is it just like a difference in philosophy that these people don't believe in remote work? Identify what are these blockers and then try to address these blockers. Once that is done, make an example that you can stay away from office, but your productivity, your work, your deliverables are not affecting. So these three stages are like the bare minimum if you want to negotiate a remote work in your current opportunity. Now, once that is done, you could go and present your case that I really have this passion of remote work for whatever reason. I want to also go and take selfies at the beach with my laptop and pina coladas, and I want to do it on a regular basis. What would it take for you to give me that opportunity? And start by negotiating. And usually, I don't have a data of how many people have successfully cracked it, but from my data points and people I know, there is like a really high success rate. There are people who negotiated at least 2 or 3 times a day remote work successfully. And once that is done, then you can identify, okay, what are your problems that you are getting into when you are into remote job. For me, for a very long time, it was waking up on time and actually having a habit. Second biggest problem for me was actually shutting down my laptop after 8 or 9 hours. I was like working crazy for 11, 8 hours because there is no turn off switch when it's remote work. And yes, there are bad sides of remote work as well. Now, once that is done, then you can figure out, do you want to continue like this, or do you want to look for a new opportunity, or do you want to start something else? Because by now you have enough data points of what are the blockers, what are the philosophical difference, what are the things of remote work that is not fit for me. And after all this exercise, you might come to the conclusion that remote work is not for me, because remote work is not for everyone. Trust me, some people really like to go. I still could tell from my experience that the amount of knowledge that I got working in an office is nowhere near compared to what I'm getting at remote work. Like I started investing in a very young age, and that was only because I was talking to people sitting at the water cooler and having a tea at the office. That never happened in remote work. So after doing all this exercise, you might identify, okay, remote work is not for me. Then you can go back and continue doing your job. If you think, okay, remote work is for me, then you can negotiate further, and you can make your case, make your value, make it fully remote, or you can find a fully remote job. I won't go how to find a remote job because there are people who have done better job than me. There are articles, there are different job boards that you could find, or you could start something of your own, which should always be like the first priority if you want real freedom. So yeah.
Amazing. Okay, great advice. Thank you so much for sharing this. So let's move on to the last section, which we call Let's Get Nerdy. And that is where we will give the listeners some resources and advice that like they can follow up on. So the first thing that I want to talk about is you mentioned a lot of times like a few resources where people that you have been using in order to get into, more into hardware, drones and all of that. So can you just do a dump of your favorite resources around everything that you're into?
You mean for the hardware specifically?
Yeah, hardware, drones, or anything else that you are into.
All right. So I think specifically for the knowledge, general, if you are into tech industry, it's really important for you to stay updated with what's happening. If you talk about specific, I can recommend some newsletter. Like there is a TLDR newsletter where every day it gives a dump of what's happening in the tech industry. There are generally 10 to 15 articles, and you could learn a lot about it just seeing the headlines. And the way I consume information is not by getting fascinated or just by reading every blog word by word. If something, I like to stay updated of what's happening in the tech industry, what new company Elon Musk bought and what did he say on X. But I don't really obsess with in a way that I need to read every word and I need to know about everything. So I have a holistic view of everything that's happening in the industry, but I only go deep in the subjects that really matters to me. So that is the first thing that I do. It's really important that you figure out a way to consume information and optimize for signal to noise ratio. So SNR is actually an electronics concept, but the way it means is that you should optimize to maximize signal from the noise. There is a lot of noise out there, but you need to have mental models that will help you know what is the signal that I need to grasp and what is the noise that I need to eradicate. So this comes with experience. This comes with the prioritization. I had a really, really hard time prioritizing during my university days because I was very fascinated with hardware. I was very fascinated with drones, but whenever a new framework in front end comes, I also wanted to try that. So I had tried almost all the frameworks for front end, all the frameworks for back end, but that really never really helped me in real life because I always segued back to hardware. That was my main mojo. I don't really see that as a wasted time, but all I'm trying to say is that do prioritization, understand what is signal for you and what is noise. Do take a look at the noise, but don't really go deep down. Don't get obsessed over it.
Yeah, I like that. And let's get into the specifics a little bit. Just like, what was that blog that you mentioned, which you follow for hardware related information, like the one where you create courses, like the drone course for?
Right. So it's called Hackaday, Hackada, hackaday.com. So it's like a rolling news forum where whenever anything happens in the hardware, anyone makes a cool project, they reshare it in their own words and they link to the original article or the original videos. And they have this small called Hackaday IO where they invite people like me to make courses. So there are amazing courses. I remember when I was doing the drone course, there were four other people who were doing some course. One was on wearable technology, which is like now getting very famous, like AI pen. It was like even back then there were some wearable technologies, LEDs and all. And they have courses for KiCad, which is like a PCB designing tool. So yeah, there are a lot of courses, and the best thing is it's all free. So you could use that. For the hardware, there is this company called Adafruit, which is in the New York, and they make small hardware boards, open source design and everything. They have this huge library of components, and the best part is everything is open source, including design, including schematics, including code. So you can consume that as a knowledge center, as an encyclopedia. So whenever you are designing a PCB, you can go and refer to a similar PCB design of a component that they have already designed, and then you can learn, okay, they have done something, why they have done something like that, why they have put a capacitor of 1000 microfarad and not 100 microfarad. And then you can go deep down into the rabbit hole of why do you need a capacitor, what capacitor do you need, how do you find the voltage. And that was my way of, when I know how to optimize for signal to noise, that was the first step. Second way was finding a thing, finding my signal, get obsessed over it, and dig a rabbit hole, and then learn as much as possible for that topic. And recently that has been photography and filmmaking, which is like totally different, but it has stayed constant for every topic that I find interest in.
What is the good resource that you recently discovered about photography and filmmaking?
So I have already was fascinated with photography for a very long time, but I was doing it on mobile. A few years back, I picked up my first real camera, DSLR, and recently I picked my first mirrorless camera. And like recently, not in photography, but in filmmaking, I started using something called log profiles, which is like a very very flat profile, but it gives you a lot of latitude to color grade on top of it. So the colors that you see in Hollywood movies, so like Wes Anderson sort of colors, you can do by log profile. So all these things are really fascinating. And I'm not sure how many filmmakers goes into it, but whenever I find something interesting in photography, like you could relate to it because in the recent iPhone that Apple released, they also gave a support for log, which is like a huge thing. So log, I'm talking about the same thing, but in mirrorless. So log profile is like this flat profile, but the way I take it is I relate it to technical. So I then start and find a paper on log profile and how scientists come up with it and how it's implemented on the code. So now I can take any camera and I can take the raw video and I can add my log profile of it because on the top I return a small code on it. So this is my way of relating my different hobbies.
This is Okay, I'll stop saying that this is amazing, but this is amazing.
You're
uh,
literally like a farmer, like growing your own vegetables and then yeah,
I would say
using them in the kitchen.
I would say like just a very curious person who likes to have a lot of hobbies and find a way to combine all those hobbies. Like for example, when I was working for Mercedes, there was this project we were working on called active noise cancellation in the car, and that was you could imagine because I'm wearing AirPods and it has active noise cancellation. But how many of people out there, especially from the electronics industry, would know how ANC works? So it's like whenever a noise signal is coming, the processor inside this mic will generate the same signal but 180-degree out of phase. So we have all learned in physics convolution theorem, and these two signals will cancel each other out. So it's not doing like it's creating a suction or anything, but it's actually all electronics and all signal processing. So like just find a way to relate all those things you are fascinated with and dig a rabbit hole and go as deep as possible. And the really good thing that is, if you are able to explain these concepts to someone, then you could know that you have understood it. And I brought this up because just today I learned about a new patent that Apple is filing for noise cancellation, and I wanted to find a person who I could explain what ANC is, and now I have done that.
and the final question. So, what are some cool things that I, as a software developer, can try at home, in the hardware space? So I know you mentioned in our last conversation that it's possible for me to get into drone building, and you also have a YouTube series where you teach how to build a drone, and we'll link to that in the show notes. What else? What else? Maybe something with Raspberry Pi or something. Any DIY project ideas for non-hardware people?
Drones is definitely one, and I actually made a video 5 years back why engineering students from any background should build drones, whether it's chemical, whether it's electrical, whether it's mechanical, whether it's CS, because it's a platform where everyone can learn something by building it. Just a word of caution that a caution thing here is that a drone can be really, really expensive to build, number one. And number two, you will destroy it no matter what. The first time that you will fly, you will destroy it. And it's not a good picture to see you spend 50,000 rupees and see it burning in front of your eyes. That's never a good sight, especially for the college students. So that's the only thing with the drones. Otherwise, it's like the great platform. Build a drone and just keep doing experiments on top of it from whatever thing you want to learn, and you will be able to go there. And now, especially, the time is good because back in the days we had no components in India. We have to either import or either settle down with the crappy components that we found locally. But nowadays everything is available, and it's good. But second thing that I advise everyone to build, and that is not just for learning purposes, but also for your own convenience, is home automation. And because home automation is a platform that will give you opportunity to learn hardware, where you will do circuit designing, you will do soldering, little bit of wiring here and there. It will give you an opportunity to learn software, where you will program the logic, you will write a small application maybe, you will debug it, and you will also monitor your home, right? So you will learn monitoring tools like Grafana, like NetData, and you will also learn if my home automation server is running out of space. So you will also learn monitoring, which is like a DevOps thing. So it's not really software, but hardware, software, DevOps. So the next thing is it will make you learn networking. And I got so good with networking in college days just because of home automation that even people who have done masters in CS and IT, they were like no match in networking. And this is only because of home automation, because I was doing so much on packet level. Nowadays there are libraries, so don't get me wrong, but back then you have to open the IP stack documentation and then you write IP4 v4 packets and check Wireshark. But networking, security, communication protocols, the OSI layer that people read, everything will be covered in home automation. So this is like a great project. You just need to buy a Raspberry Pi, small relays, some LEDs, and you will be good to go. So must recommend project for everyone.
Any resources for people to get into it, just like your drone video? Do you have a series for that?
I don't have a series on home automation, but my very good friend Sachin from Gujarat, he has a channel called Techie SMS. He's very active on YouTube. I had an opportunity to meet him twice, once at Home Automation Expo that happens in India every year. So you could follow him, Techie SMS, Sachin. He's great. I don't use the things that he teaches because I moved to something called Home Assistant. So it's like an open source project that you could refer. But if you could just type home automation using Raspberry Pi or home automation or using Arduino on Google, then you will get a tons of resources out there.
Correct. Makes a lot of sense. All right, Ayan. I feel like you are this person who is deeply curious, and you obviously have so many success stories. And the like in my head after this conversation, I've got like three things that are creating that have enabled you to have this success. One is that you have just been at it for a long, long time, like since 2012, 2013. Now it's been like 10, 12 years. So things compound and people don't talk about that a lot. So like if you're at something for a long, long time, it's going to get you someplace. And then you've you've been documenting stuff, you have been online, you've been networking, you've been going to conferences, you've been just expanding your network all the way. And that is also another thing that people don't do and a lot more people should do. And the final thing that I really like, it only occurred to me like towards the end as we were speaking, is that you, as I said, you are just really curious and you are not afraid to go into the depths and just like go under the hood for anything. And so hardware, about drone, you're going into photography, you're going into front end development, you're checking out all the new frameworks that are coming out. That like not even software developers do, but you're doing it. And I think that is such a great, like these three pieces of I don't know frameworks of philosophies are such a great way to do something meaningful and build your career.
100%. I think it all boils down to the attitude of solving problem. Like you mentioned, front end, it was mainly because I had the great software I wanted to showcase, but I don't have a web page to show. So let's learn front end and build a bare minimum backbone thing. And similarly, if you talk about other things, I have a drone, I can fly, I am a great pilot, but how do people know? So let's add a camera on top of it. And now that you have added a camera, let's get the best possible video out of it. For that, you learn everything like log profiles, color grading, ND filters, and whatnot. So yeah, everything connects. Everything eventually connects and makes sense and compounds over time.
This is
I'm just
amazing.
so
Thank
inspired
you
by
so
your
much.
constant learners mindset that like you don't know front end development, so it's like you'll go out and learn that yourself. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
inspiring.
not an expert in anything, but definitely know little bits of everything here and there.
This is amazing. Okay, thank you so much for recording this episode with us, Ayan. I think this is one of the most unique interviews that I have ever done and probably you will ever do. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Thanks for having me. I am hopeful that this will add value to anyone listening. But yeah, great work. Keep them coming, and I'm here to support you in any way possible.